Welcome to part two of our NEC Now podcast with Robert Morris men's basketball coach Andy Toole. In part one, we covered his arrival in Moon Township in 2007 and his 3 years as an assistant coach that culminated with back-to-back NEC titles in 2009 and 2010. In part two, we pick it up in the spring of 2010 when Andy is named the nation's youngest men's basketball coach. Enjoy. You get the call, 29 years old, youngest coach in the country. Looking back, now you've done it for a decade. How hard was it to make that move, that one spot down the bench?
It was incredibly hard. I tell people all the time, I don't care if you're 29, 39, or 49, you're never really ready. And I remember one of our first team practices, we're all in the huddle, and we broke to go to do stretching. And Russell Johnson's still standing there as I'm still standing there. And I said, Russ, what are you doing? And he just says, holy, you're the head coach. And we both started to laugh, and he ran off to go stretch. And so it was a different deal. But, a lot of those guys, went to bat for me. A lot of them, went to the administration and explained that they would want me to be the head coach and the guy leading the program. And, that group, Velton and Russell and Karan Williams and, those guys, I feel in a lot of ways I kind of grew up with those guys because, they were sophomores that year. I was a first-year head coach, and, we were just trying to figure it all out on the fly and see what we could accomplish. And, the year started off, up and down. Again, a bunch of new guys trying to figure it out. We had a roster that was virtually all freshmen and sophomores. Gary Wallace was our only senior. I think we had one senior, one junior. Everybody else was a freshman and sophomore. And so the inexperience was crazy. But, Gary and Russell and Velton and Karan and some of those guys, Elijah Thompson, some of those guys that were, had some experience, they really stepped up as the year went on, and, we were able to find our footing.
Yeah, it was up and down to start. You get red hot down the stretch. You wind up going to the semis. You're back at Quinnipiac again, and this play is like seared in my brain. 13 seconds left. Velton with the ball. Elijah sets the screen. Ruddy hedges, and then Velton beats him, into the lane and hits like his signature floater. Game over. You win again at Quinnipiac. Did you, as a coach, both as an assistant and then, as Velton moved on to his next year, did you just have the confidence with him right from the jump that you put the ball in his hands and something good's going to happen?
Obviously, I recruited Velton, and in high school he had made, clutch plays and, had that kind of winning mentality. But really, Karan Abraham, that my first year as a head coach, he was our leading scorer, and he went down. We were played at Monmouth, and he went down with Achilles injury, tore his Achilles. And from that day forward, I think Velton really kind of stepped forward and assumed some of that leadership stuff, assumed some of that late game dramatics. The team really started to kind of take on his personality. And like you said, we got hot down the stretch. I remember going to that Quinnipiac game, and sometimes I question the marketing people in the world, and you talk about bulletin board material, but they had put out on their website a video montage of the championship game the year before. And it was all these highlights from the game and student reaction of dejected students leaving the building, and then they flash across the screen, not this year.
I think I remember this.
And after the not this year, they broke into the chant, I believe that we will win. And that was like a minute and a half promo for the game. We probably showed our team that promo 15 times in the 48 hours between our conference quarterfinal and that semifinal game. And our guys were so jacked up to play that game. Our guys were so excited to be in that game. They played incredibly hard, as all of the NEC tournament games, are played with great intensity and energy. And when Velton hit that shot, Tom Moore, I think just, the air was sucked out of him. And for me, as a first-year head coach, that win, I think I started to feel a little bit more comfortable kind of just in my own skin, trusting my gut, trusting my instinct, managing the game, the substitutions, all that stuff. that was a really pivotal game for me because those guys believed in our plan. They went out and executed our plan, and we were able to win and move on to play LIU in the championship.
So it's the start. You go to LIU. It's the start of their run with Boyd and Olasawir. Great game. Like that may be one of the best, if not the best, championship game as far as high level play in that game. I think you came back from about 8 down with a couple minutes to go. Russell Johnson ties it. You go to overtime. You come up short in that game, but the season comes. Your NEC season there comes to an end. What did you learn that year from the start of the season, your first as a head coach, to the end?
Oh man, I mean, so much. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, I think guys that are, wanting to be head coaches, you go through that first season, exhaustion's not even the word, when it's over. Just the mental exhaustion from the year, everything you're saying, every practice you're planning, every pregame speech, every postgame speech, you're replaying it all in your mind. I mean, I remember driving to and from, work each day and saying, okay, what are the important messages that I got to get across today? And then on the way home, did I get them across? Did they understand it? I mean, you're constantly evaluating every decision you make. You're poring over film, you're poring over opponent's film because, you want to make sure that you're gaining as much information as you can. And, there's probably a balance to that, right? You probably can overdo it. And I think as you get further along in your head coaching career, you understand some of the ebbs and flows a little bit better. But, as in your first year, you feel completely exposed. You make a basket, you think you're going to have the greatest team in the world. You turn it over, you think you're getting fired tomorrow. I mean, it's just like the emotional roller coaster of that first year is so hard. And even your first couple years, because you got to have some of those experiences, you got to feel some of those things. And now, now 10 years in, sometimes you can say, okay, let's, take a deep breath and, we'll come back to get them tomorrow. But that championship game was an amazing one. We were down 8-9 points. They went zone late in the game. It was something Coach Ferry would do late in games where he would have a lead and then go zone. And it actually allowed us to get back in the game. I remember Karan Williams hitting a 3-pointer right in front of our bench, and we knew they were going to go zone. And so we had practiced for it. We had planned for it. And we were able to kind of flow right into zone offense. We executed really well, and that got us back. There's, a play that just sticks out in my mind. There was a loose ball on a baseline, on a rebound late in that game. We were down 1. And, everybody went for it. There was a huge jumble, and they were given the ball. I still haven't seen the play. I would like to go back and watch the play and see. I wish we had Warwing back then, or the 2-minute challenge, because from my vantage point, I still believe in my mind that it could have been our ball. And, we would have had the ball with under 10 seconds and, a chance to win the NEC championship. They ended up getting the ball, LIU, and we ended up fouling down 3 and, ran a decent play and kind of got Russell a decent look that didn't go in. But again, as a coach, sometimes like that group gave everything they could to that season. And those are the things that you're so proud of as a coach, because, there wasn't one more thing that those guys could have done in order to put us in a better position or give us a better chance to win. And sometimes it just doesn't go your way.
Let's move on to the next season, 11-12, and just talk about the NEC for a second. I think that might have been like our zenith at that point. Well, we had 3 ranked in the top 100 that year. We had Wagner with Lateef Rivers and John Williams. We had you guys, we had LIU, and Quinnipiac was still strong. When you look back to that period in those games, like how hard was it for you as a coach to game plan? You didn't there were no nights off against these top teams. We were so top heavy.
I mean, there really isn't nights off very much in league play anywhere. And, Wagner and LIU were, extremely high level. Quinnipiac was very strong, and so you just knew, you knew those teams were teams you were going to have to see at some point or another if you were going to try and, win a championship. And, it was funny. I think we might've been 14-4 that year in conference play and came in 3rd place. LIU, I think, was 16-2. And I think Wagner was just ahead of us with 3 losses. And, some of you could start to see it brewing with some of the non-conference, right? Some of the games that our teams had played against non-conference opponents, you knew that they were for real. You knew they were playing challenging teams. I remember Wagner losing to CJ McCollum's LIU team by 1 point at home. And you just said to yourself, like, okay, these guys are are legit, and this was, Danny's second year, and they had made dramatic improvements in his first. And so we knew that they were going to be a real player. And obviously we knew what LIU had back, as well as, Quinnipiac's toughness as always. So, we knew it was going to be, some big time play down the stretch. And we went into Wagner in that semifinal and, played another classic game. I remember Velton Jones telling me the day before that game, Coach, we're not losing. And he had a look in his eyes and a will about him that was, incredibly strong. At our shoot around the day before, Lucky Jones got run into on a crazy play and hurt his knee. And so I was, about to lose my mind, but he was able to, kind of come back and, really help us in that game. And, Velton, I think, got Kenny Ortiz to bite on a shot fake, down the stretch of that game and got fouled on a three that allowed us to, really, fully take advantage of the game and win it.
That 2011-12 season, it ends again at LIU, but you wind up making a nice postseason run in the CIT. You beat Toledo and Indiana State. I know it's not the NCAA. You've always been an advocate of playing in the postseason. How hard is it to get your guys refocused if you don't win the conference tournament for the next postseason? It
takes some time. It takes some time because there is, all the buildup is towards that conference tournament championship. When we went into LIU and, their offense was so high powered. Velton got hurt, probably broke a rib early in that game, kind of get knocked to the ground on a breakaway, and, it was never the same. And we kind of were lost in that game because of it. We kind of had lost our way. We ended up playing LIU's game where it was just, a race, and they were better at it, much better at it than we were. And so we couldn't really control the game. And there was a lot of, I remember riding back on the bus the next morning and, guys are just somber, they're just really somber. And I think, that group was another young group, juniors kind of being the core of our team. Some good underclassmen that were a part of that team. And we were able to convince them to try and get the first postseason win in Robert Morris history in, 30 years. 1983, Robert Morris won a first-round NCAA tournament game against Georgia Southern, and that kind of became our rallying cry. Can we go and experience, a win in March, a postseason tournament win? And we went out to Indiana State. We were down at the half, and, I came in the locker room at halftime, and, I just said to the guys, if we don't want to play the right way, we can just go home right now. And, guys started to really chirp up and, say, let's win the game. We're here. We might as well try and win it. And in the second half, we played, tremendously well. Got the win. Guys were really excited getting that win. And then we went to Toledo on St. Patrick's Day, and, we jumped them. I don't know if they were overly excited to be there or not, but I know our guys were. And they came out and we got on them early, and the energy just kind of stayed with us all night. And we guarded like crazy. We made shots. We executed. And then we played Fairfield, I believe, which was in the quarterfinal. Rakim Sanders was on that team, and Sidney Johnson was the coach, and they just kind of beat us up physically. They posted Rakim Sanders, and there was no answer for him. But, it was another 26-win season. And, I think these guys, it really paid dividends for us, in the next few years as we got into, NITs and NCAAs, because guys had experienced what it was like to win games in March.
Let's move on to the 12-13 season. One of the things that I think went under the radar that year is you completed a 4-game sweep of Ohio U. This is always amazing to me. They made the Sweet 16 one of those years. They won an NCAA game the other years. I think they won over 90 games over those 4 seasons. That's really hard to do. That team was high level. How satisfying is doing something like that? And then also things like, beating Quinnipiac, Duquesne, 7 out of 8 times. Like, how satisfying is that to you as a coach?
Well, it's great for our guys and for the reputation of our program, and it was something that our players, those are the guys that really, locked in for those games. I remember the first year we beat Ohio U, DJ Cooper, who, obviously is a great mid-major player, had an unbelievable career at Ohio U. He got called for a tough push-off foul late in the game at our place. And then that was Coach Rice's last year. And then the next 2 years, we had to go back to Ohio U, and we won a double overtime game down there where we had 31 turnovers. It was a complete, chaos, but somehow we were able to figure it out. And when they came back to us that year, that was Carvel Anderson's game. It was kind of his coming out party. He was 10 for 10 in that game, 8 for 8 from 3. And they didn't really have a chance. We just those guys were so jacked up. And again, it goes back to some of your leadership. I know one of the first years and some of the stuff that happens that you find out later as a coach is always interesting. That the first year we played them, Velton Jones was a redshirt freshman. DJ Cooper was a freshman. And DJ Cooper had some choice words for Velton during that early in that game about how he wasn't a good player and, wasn't, very high on their scouting report. And, some of those things that, if anyone's watched the Last Dance documentary or Michael Jordan has a grudge and took things personally against every single person he's ever encountered, Velton had a little bit of that in him, and I think each year, he made sure the practices leading up to that Ohio U game, he made sure guys were ready to go. He came with another level of energy and focus. And, when he did that, that a lot of times meant trouble for our opponent. And those were huge wins for us to be able to get, and again, ways to kind of continue to build the reputation of our program.
When you do something like that, like sweeping them 4 in a row, does it make it that much harder for you to schedule these type of games?
Yeah, scheduling's always been a challenge for us. Geographically, it's been a challenge. And then, because we've had some success, there's been, a number of times, even in games that are guaranteed games where a guy will say to us, hey, listen, you guys play too hard. We'd rather play somebody else, and so you always got to face those battles. And the Ohio U was a prime example. I mean, there were some teams in our league that they were paying guarantees to while we were playing a 4-year home and home against them, and being successful. And so, yeah, it doesn't help when the next year rolls around and people in the Mid-American or leagues like that are looking to figure out who they're going to play. Sometimes they're not excited to hear your call.
In 12-13, you mentioned Carvel was added to the team. You have Velton, you have Karan, you have Mike McFadden, Russell. Velton's hobbled that year. He has a shoulder injury, not himself for much of the year. And I want to talk about Velton again for a second. Every year or so we play that feature we did on him where, and I'm going to quote you here, you say he's a pit bull. He's so hard-headed and stubborn. Once he gets something in his brain, he can almost will things to happen. When you hear that now, like, what does it take you back to when in coaching Velton?
Just how much fun it was to coach all those guys, really. And again, I talked about, I feel like in a lot of ways as a coach, I grew up with those guys and as they were growing up. And, there were some battles, whether it was Velton, Russell, Lucky. There were times where you're battling those guys to compete the way you need them to compete the way they want to compete and the way they're capable of. And but V had another gear. He had an ability to kind of raise his level. I remember my I guess it was my second year as the head coach. We used to scrimmage Niagara every year in Erie when Joe Mihalik was the coach, and they were absolute bloodbaths. They were, 2.5 hours of scratching, clawing, grabbing, fouling, holding. And we were really lethargic as we kind of came out of that game. And again, every year it almost seems like guys have to remember how hard you have to play in order to be a good team. And the year prior, we had beaten Niagara pretty good. And, they came and they jumped us. They were all over us. I'm calling timeout. Those guys, Niagara's hooting and hollering. And Velton comes out of the timeout. I kind of challenged him out of the timeout. He drives to the basket and he gets leveled, knocked to the ground. And from that moment on, it was like he almost needed to get knocked on the ground and knocked on his butt in order to realize, like, this is competition. And from that moment on, we stood toe-to-toe with those guys for the rest of the scrimmage. And that was kind of Velton's way, right? He just, sometimes, would kind of be at his own pace, and then boom, in the middle of a practice, a play would happen, a drill would happen, something would get him energized or intensified, and all of a sudden, the building would be on fire because he would be flying around making plays, letting guys know about it. And with some of the other competitive guys we had, it just fueled, great practice settings. But I thought, as a coach, it was always such a great luxury to have because you could look at him and you could tell him, hey, we really need you here. And he would understand that. He would understand kind of how to get himself to that next level. And he could do it in the blink of an eye. And so, that was something that really saved us a number of times where maybe other guys weren't as engaged or as locked in, and you could challenge him, and he would really rise to the occasion.
So that season, you fall in the semis to a rising Mount team with Jamie, and you need to refocus. You were the regular season champs. You need to refocus for the NIT. That probably was not a problem when you saw who your opponent's going to be as far as focusing them. What went through your mind when you and the players found out that you'd be playing that game at the Toole Center?
Well, two things. I would say, that team that Jamie had was a really good team. Rashad Wack was on that team. They had, 2 or 3, 1,000-point scorers that were on that team. And Sam Prescott, I believe, was on that team. And, I was – Norfleet, I was surprised that they came in 5th place. I thought that they were really, really good all year long, one of the harder teams we had faced all season, and knew how dangerous they were coming into that game. And, again, we weren't good. We weren't good in that game. And, again, the dejection that you feel when you don't reach that ultimate goal, Velton, Russell, those guys being seniors, made it really tough. And then my thing was like, let's get back to work. Let's get back to practice. And they were some of the worst practices we had because, I knew we were going to the NIT. Guys weren't really trying to feel practicing at that point in the year. And I was so angry that we hadn't, played better that, there was a lot of head bumping going on. And as we got to that NIT selection show, I got a text earlier that day from Jim Duzick, our media relations director, and said that ESPNU wants you to come on the selection show. And I couldn't figure out why they would want me to do that. So, of course, at that point in time, I went to Twitter and started trying to figure out what was what and, read that, Kentucky's not going to be able to host an NIT game because of first and second round NCAA tournament action at Rupp Arena. I replied to Dues. I said, do you think we're playing Kentucky? We have no idea what's going on. I get on the phone with ESPNU at about 8:39, maybe 8:45. I say to the producer, are you going to tell me that we're playing Kentucky here in about 5 minutes? He said, well, you're going to have to wait 5 minutes to find out. Joe Gallo, who was my assistant at the time, now head coach of Merrimack, is watching the selection show with my wife because he didn't have cable in his house and didn't have ESPNU. So he came over to watch the show. Him and my wife were upstairs watching the show. I'm downstairs on the phone, and they announced that we're playing Kentucky. And as I'm on the phone, it's ringing off my head. The text messages, the calls, the emails, it was 2 hours of nonstop, incoming messages, including emails from Big Blue Nation saying what a joke it is that we're playing at Robert Morris and you guys stink. And, it was something like I've never experienced before. When I got to work on that Monday, there was a line of tickets. There were a line of people lined up for tickets, Smartly enough, Robert Morris decided we're not going to sell any tickets online. We didn't want Kentucky fans coming and scooping all the tickets up. And so there were people, I pulled in the parking lot at 8 a.m. There was a 200-person line to buy tickets. People started calling all over campus. We had, English professors sending me emails saying, somebody just called me about buying tickets. They said they were from Kentucky. Can you direct them? And I wasn't replying to any of those emails. It was the campus was crazed. And, watching that Kentucky team, knowing our team, I thought that we had a chance. That earlier that year we had gone to Xavier. We had lost by a point at Xavier. We had gone down to Arkansas. We were down 3 with 40 seconds to go. Lost an offensive rebound and had to foul. So we had been close. We had been in some of those games, and that group had so much experience. They had also begged for somebody to come play us at our place of a high major nature. That was always their, if we could ever get one of these people to come play us at Toole Center, we can beat them. And now we had our chance. And so, as we prepared that game and as we got ready for that game, I think our guys truly believed that they would have an opportunity to win the game. And, we came out for warm-ups at 5:30 and the place was absolutely packed. We jumped on them 10-0 and then just tried to hold on as best we could from there.
So let's talk. That game will be part of your time capsule as much for the atmosphere as it was for the win. And as you said, a couple hours before the game, it was crazy. One of the things I noticed about you, you're a little different than other coaches. Most coaches like to lock themselves in the locker room before the game. You're always milling about. You're talking to people. I remember you before that game, and you were standing in the end zone, and you were surrounded by fans would come up to talk to you, people from the school, and you're just kind of taking in the atmosphere. What are your memories from like the build-up, that last hour or so before you get the tip?
I mean, there's a ton of them, right? And I mean, some of them are just burned in your brain. And you're right. I hate being in the locker room. I struggle to be in the locker room before the game by myself. I just too many things are going through my mind, and it's nice to be able to come out, watch your team warm up, watch the opposing team warm up, get a real feel for what your body language looks like, and is there energy and some juice on the court as guys are warming up. And there was certainly no issue with juice to the point where I had to tell my staff to bring the guys back in. Usually if it's a 7:00 game, we hit the court at 5:45 to stretch, an hour and 15 minutes before. I mean, our whole team was out there at 5:30 working. I'm like, this is not good. Like, this is too much time to warm up. This is, and our student section was full at that time as well. And so, this is just, so I had to actually bring the guys in off the court just to get them in the locker room, try and get them to relax a little bit, try and get them to cool down, take a little bit of a break, because I thought they were going, too hard in the warm-up piece. And, I did kind of take some time to myself as, we were going to let the guys back out of the locker room just to kind of sit there and observe how much fun it was, how cool it was, how neat it was to see all these people starting to file in and, be there for a Robert Morris game. And, it felt like as the game went on, more and more people just seemed to continue to trickle in, to the building. I had to go address the fans about throwing stuff on the court. That was the first time for me. Of course, in the biggest game in school history, you're sitting there telling fans not to throw stuff on the court. Meanwhile, inside, I'm saying, this is great. We have throwing things on the court. So it's an amazing thing about how you kind of just deal with it. I remember late in the game, I went to try and get some water from the water cooler, and there was like 4 guys just leaning on the water cooler watching the game like it was a summer league game in a park. And I was like, yo, guys, could you just step back for a minute while I get some water? Oh, coach, no problem. So, some of the things that could probably only happen if you have a game like that in the Toole Center. But an incredible memory for our players, for our university, something that's still talked about, something that people still know us as. As I look back through all of our years, when I got there in April of 2007, we made a lot of phone calls that no one returned. And then in 2010, after the Villanova game, we started to get some, hey, coach, I saw that Villanova game. Hey, yeah, I know who you guys are. You guys have been in back-to-back NCAA tournaments. And then, fast forward 3 years when we beat Kentucky, that really became a really great point of conversation. And it was funny, that year we went to Atlanta for the Final Four. Louisville was the national champion, and obviously hated rivals of Kentucky. And anywhere myself or my staff went in Robert Morris gear, Louisville fans were grabbing us and saying, hey, my brother-in-law is a Kentucky fan. Can you come take a picture with me? I really want to, I want to bust his chops. So there was a lot of fun with that game. And, it's something 7 years later that people still reference.
All right, last question about the game. I want to go down to the play at the end. So you have Velton dribble down into the corner and call timeout. Jimmy Dykes on the broadcast says, this is shocking to me, or that is shocking to me. You run that really cool play where Russell comes around McFadden's screen and Velton hits him and winds up back in Mike's hands and he gets fouled. All right, so I've always wanted to ask you some questions about this. Was this a play you had used before, or was it something you had practiced and you were waiting for the right moment, or was that something you just drew up on the spot?
So we had used it before in practice. And it was something I had seen watching another game, and the team I was watching didn't run the play that we ran, but they ran a certain cut that I thought would be hard to guard. And so, it kind of sparked me thinking about this idea. And I've always kind of been a proponent, especially in college basketball, that guys are more comfortable taking the ball out underneath the basket than they are on the sideline. Obviously in the NBA, everything's a side out. So those guys are really comfortable with side outs. But in college, there's not as many. And I thought that guys are more confident. You could get some more stuff at the rim. You could get some more scoring opportunities if you get it to the baseline. And in the Bryant game that year, that was the regular season championship, basically, And that was an unbelievable game. Still one of the games our guys talk about as best atmospheres they've ever been a part of. I was trying to get Carvel Anderson to drive it to the baseline to call a timeout late in that game. Smartly enough, he just raised up and made a three right in front of our bench that we didn't need the timeout or anything else because he just took care of it. And so now in this situation, as Velton came over half court, I told him to drive it to the baseline to call a timeout. I wanted to get the ball to the baseline. I knew we were going to run that play. Again, we hadn't run it in the game, so I didn't know exactly if it was going to work. But through scouting, I thought that it would. And obviously, we executed it really well. Russell made a great cut. Velton made a great pass. And then Mike stayed with the play and was able to, find the rebound. I think if anybody other than Willie Cauley-Stein would have been under the basket, I think Russell would have had an uncontested layup. But when you have a guy that's got a 7'2" wingspan that can go from one side of the lane to the other in one step, he was able to kind of affect the shot. But Mike was smart enough to be able to be there for the offensive rebound and the foul.
Thanks for watching part 2 of our 4-part NEC Now podcast with Robert Morris's Andy Toole. Be on the lookout for part 3 coming soon. But in the meantime, be sure to subscribe to the NEC Overtime Pod on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify.